Welcome to the second episode of the Agility Exchange Agile podcast. I have Pan Wei with me. He is one of the senior practitioners of Agile in DBS Bank, and he has given us some of his time, and he's been gracious enough to discuss about his experiences with Agile in the industry and his journey so far. So welcome Pan Wei to the podcast. Good to have you here. Let's start with your background and your journey so far in Agile.
Thank you, Salandra. It's nice to be here. I've been in the IT industry for a pretty long time. So when it first started in '94, when I graduated, I joined the Singapore technology. So we do defense systems. So we talk about radars, right? That can see maybe 250 nautical miles. We talk about control tower simulator. So you can imagine, let's say like Changi Airport, they have the iconic control tower, 360 degrees. So that was in the 90s, where we don't have this kind of graphics. We use signal graphics. So it was those kind of systems that I was involved with. So in the military, then in about 2000, I go on to the consulting space, working for Rational Software. So that's when you have UML, software engineering practices, and so on, right? So with that, we actually, of course, that started my consulting journey from software engineering consulting, now Agile, Lean, beyond budgeting, and so on. So so that's the overall experience. Companies that I work with includes the likes of Samsung in Korea and Sony in Japan, and actually I spent quite a lot of time with Huawei technology. So different business units, from their telecom, from their enterprise systems to their mobile systems, right? So, and actually moving from Singapore to China, that was a quite an eye-opener to me. So in Singapore, even when I talk military systems, 50 people is quite a big project. When I went to Huawei, the teams that I consulted with, 50 people is a small project. Typically, you have 200 and so on, especially talk about big product lines, but it varies. So if we're talking about, let's say, the Huawei flagship model, Huawei phone flagship model got about 1,000 people. So you have several hundred in, let's say, Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Beijing. All right. So if you talk about the camera, the people are in Shanghai. You're talking about the voice and all that, they are in Beijing. And then you're talking about the back end kind of stuff is in Shenzhen. And then if you're talking about the desktops and all the apps, they are in Wuhan. So it's like 4 cities.
Wow. So
so quite interesting things that when we go into China, we have that. Yeah.
That puts the right question of the co-location
Correct.
for those teams as a big point forward. Today's session, as we agreed, it would be more focusing on the risk management on the Agile projects. And risk management as a background, we know in the traditional project management, it was a proper discipline of how to manage risk, how to calculate risk, and how to mitigate those risks. And there is a misnomer that comes in the industry that in Agile, documentation is not that heavy, and sometimes people even quote that documentation is not required. But if we don't document our risks, how will we mitigate them? So I want to know your experience with the risk management in IT projects in both traditional way and now in the Agile journey as well.
Yeah, so actually, even though when I work with military projects, right, at the beginning, in fact, the very first few ones that we actually do, we actually apply an iterative approach. So, which is the continuous feedback, moving to production or close to production environment as soon as possible. So that's something that that's always ingrained in my blood. So, and rather than planning way ahead, right? So the biggest problem with let's say like risk management is that in the traditional area where we have phase approach, right? And with the phase approach, we need to predict what is in the future in subsequent phases, which we have no experience now, right? So whereas in the iterative approach, we are going through end to end as far as possible. And in the projects that I'm working, we always say, right, if you don't know, go to prod, right, go to production, there's no users using it, you do not know the risk, right? So therefore, it's always something that I strongly advocate all throughout. Yeah. So and in terms of the risk management in IT projects or in terms of documentation, we always want to go through the full life cycle. right? Experience it, then you know where the blind spots are. Maybe your first time round, you will step on some minefields, fine, because it's still early in the project, so that's good. But we don't want to step on the minefield on the last day, all right? Maybe when, let's say, your PUs want to demo something, all right? Not on that day, right? You want to do it way earlier. So this is how I will approach risk management in general. Yeah.
So your recommended approach is prototype in such a way that you are able to cover the entire life cycle end to end,
Correct.
and that will reduce the blind spots that you'll encounter in the project.
Yeah,
So
correct.
if you don't do prototyping, maybe you'll have to face those challenges in live production rather than in a controlled, safe environment.
Correct.
That's a very good advice. We can quantify risks in so many ways, but is it possible for you to give us the top three risks which you have seen in your agile projects, which keeps on resurfacing, and you take care of those pieces in every project as soon as you start the project?
Yeah, so I actually have think about, let's say, if you say the top three things, right? So basically risk is unknown unknowns, what you do not know, right? So the blind spots. So and typically blind spots are anything that's outside the team, outside your immediate scope of influence. So that would be number one, which is the dependencies. So dependencies on other teams or dependencies on the environment, any kind of dependencies. Number two is the stakeholders, right? Stakeholders who come in, right? We feel that I have explained all the requirements to you, I've shown you, but somehow, especially in the organization right now, sometimes it doesn't register in their mind, right? So you told them 1,000 times, to say, hey, I haven't agreed to that. So that kind of a so-called, wait a minute, what is it, right? So that is a risk. And number three is, of course, when you go to production, there's a change management process. You're trying to onboard the users. The users may not come for whatever reason. So these are the three things, right? One is the dependencies, which is more usually across the teams. Number two, the stakeholders, which is the front end. And finally is the user adoption, right? They do not show up.
Right.
Yeah. So which is why I think it's very important to actually move to production. Try to get your first fan base, right? Your first fan who is going to who is willing to use your beta version and so on.
The early adopters.
Yeah, the adopters, right?
Yeah.
So actually, in light of that, right? So there is a um, um, there is a Chinese phone maker called Xiaomi. I think we know that, right?
Yep.
So they have a very interesting sales model, right? And it's actually published into the book. So the Chinese version is called 参与感. So you translate that to English, it's called engagement. So the way they try to sell the phone is through a fan base, right? So they get a fan base, and they have so many pre-orders even before the first phone, right? So and they have this so-called pyramid model for the fan base. So with and of course I don't consult that much with Xiaomi, right? A small part. In Huawei Technologies, they actually have this something like canary release, where they release first to their internal users, their VIP users, to the first group, and they have this thing called OTA, where they push the updates to these groups, and there's a gradual roll-up. So in this way, they are able to have this so-called end-to-end cycle, where they move to prod, they have the feedback, they do that. And they also have like massive amount of people who will scan all social media to actually get the feedback. So everything is known. So for example, they will actually scan the social media for this word called 发烧. 发烧 means like the phone has a fever, so it's like overheating.
Okay.
So they have, so this feedback mechanism they are very strong in this feedback mechanism. Of course, you know that they become the top seller, right? So likewise, right, that I've highlighted just now is that we want to have this end-to-end, go to prod, not just the prod to the end users or the stakeholders, that they actually get the real feedback. So what we are trying to do is to actually shorten this and this is what Agile is about, right? Yeah, shorten this end-to-end cycle, and we want to remove anything right that stretches this cycle.
Right.
Yeah, and this is what Agile risk management is about. It's actually inbuilt, right? But of course, when we try to apply it, we will say, hey, we are a bank, we don't do it this way. We don't do it this way. But actually, we actually need to really rethink our policies, our approaches, such that it is this way, right? Because if you are comparing with, let's say, your Google, your Amazon, your Netflix, with so many deployments per day, they actually have this built into the process. And as a Gandalf company, we are the D in the middle. We cannot say just because we are D, we and we cannot do it, because everybody else in Gandalf, right,
Does it?
has it, right?
Yeah.
And if we want to be in the Gandalf company, we really need to seriously look at our processes. What is it that we can remove so that we can have this kind of feedback, right? So that we have address based on dependencies, stakeholders, and users.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're focusing on that we should look at the wastage of our processes, remove the wastage, make it as lean and as clean possible. That will reduce the friction and ease out the feedback loop
Yes.
from the users as well.
Correct.
And those feedbacks are the golden nuggets for any application to fine tune on the issues that you can sense out.
Yeah, correct. And actually, one of the, maybe to add to a interesting and I would say a very inspiring story. So you know Ken Beck,
Yep.
right? So he's the extreme programming guy, the father of TDD, the whole stuff, right? And he's also one of the Gang of 4. So very respectable guy. So I listened to his podcast. So he was talking about at the age of 50, he joined Facebook. And in Facebook, he went for this 6-week boot camp.
All right.
So you got this 50-year-old guy, the famous guy, and then you have all the people who are much younger and so on, right? And these people are like pushing out code like crazy, right? He said, hey, I'm going to do my unit test and so on.
Okay.
He was doing that. So of course you find that you would think that he would have the best quality, right? But no, when you go to production, things fail.
Okay.
You cannot replicate all this environment and all that, right? So and then he has maybe that enlightenment or that flashpoint or the light, right? So you're saying, hey, when I'm actually doing unit testing, what am I doing? I'm actually getting feedback. Moving to production is also a form of feedback, right? So, and am I able to move to this kind of feedback, whatever feedback it is, am I able to do it in a safe environment? So, for example, if I roll this out to my fan base, and this fan base are so loyal, even if we crash, it's fine, right? And of course, UAT is one such environment, but your fan base could be another of such environment and so on, right? So then his TDD, test driven development, is just one of the instruments to acquire feedback. It need not necessarily be the only one. Of course, now I'm stepping into very controversial area, right? But for him, when I came back in his podcast, he was saying, hey, this is one approach for feedback. There are other approaches. What can we use? Yes. So I think, and really, when we talk about risk management, is actually right to detect the unknown risk, right? Is to be able to step out, venture into unknown, step on some minefield. Never mind, you will live again, right? And then you iterate, right? So this is what we want.
So introduce a very interesting concept which a lot of product companies they normally do, which is having a good solid pool of beta testers. When we build applications in a controlled environment like a bank, which is a regulated entity,
Yeah, right.
this kind of beta testers are hard to come by. So what alternate approach you can suggest that we can have for these kind of feedbacks? Something like sandboxing within the bank and relaying it for internal users. What do you think can be a best way or a way that may work within these regulated entities?
So I think getting the feedback and so-called this fail-safe environment is very important, and definitely when we look at banking applications, because it's a bank, we're under regulation and so on, we have this natural tendency for caution, right? That is given. However, not everything that we do has to do with payment transactions. Right? Not everything that we do has to do with sensitivities. So let's say if we talk about us as a bank, right? We have external facing applications, we have internal facing applications. For internal facing applications, we also have, let's say, the administration or management kind of, let's say, finance kind of thing for internal users. We also have things like analytics, right? and that we generate reports and so on. So and let's say even talk about analytics, right? Analytics kind of application, right? It doesn't deal with transaction. Is in general is offline, right? And you're talking about a small group of analysts and so on who are looking at the data. So in this case, it's actually the you you can have a very fail-safe environment, or rather, nobody gets hurt, right? You want the data quickly so that our senior management can make decisions. What you want is the speed, right? One is the speed, and of course, we have a lot of internal applications that do qualify in that area. So our Cat 3 and Cat 4.
I just wanted to cover one more point. So we talked about risks that are coming from the blind spots. We talked about risks that may arise by not getting the proper feedback from people. So having a fan base and all. Is it possible for us to create some sort of metrics to measure these risks? Because in the traditional project management, there were books written for measuring the risk of IT projects.
Yeah.
Is there any methodology that you have come across, or maybe some hacks or some special tricks that you have picked up over the years through which you can assess which risk is more critical and which risk is slightly lighter, and based on that you prioritize on mitigating it?
Yeah, so usually when we look at, traditionally when we look at risk, we always talk about the probability of occurrence and then the impact of occurrence, right? And then you multiply the two numbers and you get something. But frankly speaking, any risk that can kill you will kill you. It doesn't mean is low likelihood or least impact. When it comes, someone will get angry, right? And in these days, anybody can get angry, anybody can spread fire over the social media, right? So it's like that metric is really a bit, I think it's a bit out of touch right now. In terms of so we talk about chaos, right? Small butterfly effect, right? The butterfly can be is low occurrence, low impact, but it becomes a tornado, right? So we really do not know. Now, so back to what I mentioned about end-to-end cycle. So it's really how fast you are able to cover the minefield, right? So it's about cover the minefield. So and then the second thing is when you step on the minefield, how fast you can react, right? So there are two things. So there's a coverage and then there's a response time. So let's talk about the first one, which is the coverage, right? So in the traditional waterfall life cycle, right? We go through the requirements, analysis, design, code and test, go to production, and then after that there's change management, right? I'll add change management because user adoption is actually very important, right? So and if you look at all these steps, then it's actually a whole life cycle, right? So then the thing is, and that whole life cycle all the way until there's some users actually using it, right? So this whole cycle we call it the 100%. So then at any point in time, right, then we can evaluate, have we reached the 100%? Right? If we have not reached the 100%, that means we have not covered the minefield, right? Of course, there may have different types of user groups and so on. There may be more dimensions than this linear dimension, but let's look at this coverage. Have our experience, right? Have our lives, have in our iterations, have we covered this 100%, right? If we haven't covered this 100%, there's definitely something we don't know. So I will use this measure called coverage, right? So this is more how far have we explored the area. So I'll use this one. Then the second one, which I mentioned, with that I learned from the CIO from Changi Airport, right? Steve Lee, that's him. You can try to look him up. So Steve was saying, if there's anything down, right? So what will happen, right? You'll get the ops guy to go and figure it out, right? And if there's a problem, you have to figure out we have a problem estimating how long it would take to find the problem or fix the problem.
So the discovery time, yeah.
Yeah. So we have this time, right? So he said, now this one is indeterminate.
True.
Right. So what he says is, right, if I have a problem, I'll try it once, twice, 30 minutes, restart everything. Okay. So and through the restart, right, I'm able to so he's able to limit the time of any fault. So he actually put a hard limit on any problem, So I think that is also quite an interesting approach, right? It goes back to this providing a fail-safe environment, right? If I have a problem, I'm able to I have a fixed time by which it can be solved. I can roll back to whatever state it is, and I make sure all my team members have the sufficient rehearsal to get this thing done.
True.
Right. So this is the I would say the two metrics. Right. One is the coverage. The other two is
The recovery.
the recovery time. Right. Independent on the discovery. Your discovery take do once, twice, cannot find it. No, you need to do a reset. Especially in the case of a fail-safe, safety critical kind of
Applications,
yeah,
yeah.
applications, right? Yeah, but of course, you go down to the analytics and let's say internal apps. No, so as long as nobody get hurt,
You can increase the threshold for that time.
Yeah, or maybe there's
Yeah.
something else. Yeah, but you can increase the threshold.
That's a
for that
very
time.
interesting approach.
Yeah.
So the coverage, I believe the thought process behind the 100% coverage is anything critical, your first user base will definitely discover it. That is the rationale behind having 100% coverage
Yeah.
as the first metrics that you have said.
Yeah, correct.
So those cosmetic issues or those smaller issues with which people can live with, those people can still ignore. But anything which is a showstopper for the entire process to go through, people will definitely feedback on that.
Correct.
So that'll ensure that your application is working at least.
Yeah.
So it's a very good nugget for people to take away for, and I believe all our users as well as listeners will be benefited by your inputs. You shared some very interesting views of how risks can be seen as well as can be mitigated and can be measured. That's it for this particular episode.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being there.
Thank you.